Okay. Everybody's got my screen. At least most people have their audio working. It's almost 5 after, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Not a ton of people in here today, which is 100% my fault, and that's okay. Last week, I know for a lot of you, um, this was originally scheduled to be last week. I was on my deathbed, it felt like, for much of last week, so I shifted it to this week. I apologize for that. I'm feeling much better. Still have a little bit of a cough and my voice is trying to give out. Hopefully, it'll be fine getting through this. I know a lot of people weren't able to make it because of the shift, but that's okay. Appreciate those of you who did make it being here, and we're still going to do this to make sure that if you showed up, hopefully you'll get some value out of what we're going to go into today. And then we're going to take the video kind of after we're done with this and probably put it out so anybody who wanted to come but missed it with the time change is able to consume it as well. Really appreciate you guys joining us. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. You guys are muted on your end. So you won't be able to say anything, but if you have questions, comments, whatever, you can share those in the chat. I can read the chat and respond to them there. So we'll go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be talking about how to automate your business processes with AI, right? We want to get into specifics about how your organization can actually use AI, specifically in your business operations. We've done some webinars on this topic before at a more conceptual level, but today we're going to dive in and I'm going to go through an actual fictional but real process that I built, an AI-driven automated workflow, and show you how I set all of that up. But what I want to do is trigger some ideas for you guys on how you can actually start deploying some of these tools inside of the organizations that you work in, right? So our objectives today are pretty straightforward. We're going to start with identifying a process for automation. So how do you identify a process that is ripe for automation with AI-driven tools? How do you then map that process in preparation for automation? And then from there, how do you actually execute the creation or the delivery of an automated process? And what tools are available to do that outside in your technology ecosystems, right? And so quick introduction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cade Brewster. I'm the founder of Brewster Consulting Group. I am a certified Six Sigma Black Belt through the American Society of Quality. I'm a business intelligence developer, a data architect, and also an AI integration specialist. We do a lot of AI integration work across different companies and clients that we work with. And so this is something that we kind of live and breathe very often. And so that's why we're going to be talking about it today and hopefully driving some value for you guys on this front. I'm seeing in the chat that Greg is still having issues with the sound. Renee, if you could maybe hop on with him and see if there's anything that we can do to help him with the sound. I'm not sure how to fix it, but it seems like he's the only one who's having that issue. Okay, so one of the reasons why I like talking about this type of thing is because there are dangers associated with AI. Everyone hears all of the AI hype going on right now out on the internet, but a lot of it is all flash and no substance. There have been massive investments made in AI integration, Gen AI, all of these different things across organizations without legitimate applications inside of the organizations. Earlier today, I was reading an article that was put out by MIT, and they studied and said that 95% of Gen AI efforts across, I believe it was Fortune 500 companies, have failed, right? And it's failed a lot of times because people are investing in the hype without clear use cases or clear applications for this technology to actually deliver value inside of their organization. And so the danger in this is spending a lot of time, money, and resources because of the hype and the buzz and not getting actual value out of it, right? We want real ROI positive AI use cases inside of business operations. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, hopefully being able to distill and get into those legitimate applications. So why do you want to automate with AI? Let's start with that. So obviously, automation leads to a reduction in manual workload. It can improve the accuracy of runs by taking out human variability. It increases your speed or your throughput and delivering inside of a process, and it just in general improved your business outcomes. Now, I do want to make a distinction that we're going to talk about a little bit more on the next page, but a distinction right now between automation and AI driven automation, right? Automation, RPA, robotics process automation, like things like that have been around for a long time. Everything now is AI driven because it's the buzzword, but much of it is not actually AI driven, right? A lot of it is just traditional RPA through tools like Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, things like that, in order to do actual RPA inside of systems. That's been around for a long time. That's exists for a long time. You can now integrate AI into some of those workflows, but it's only AI automation if you actually need to leverage AI tools inside of the workflow and be able to effectively use AI for a specific reason, right? So if you need human intelligence inside of a process right now to break down variables, to classify information, to digest paragraph form, and then summarize it, things like that, these activities that require human intuition, those are often good use cases for the actual AI piece of AI automation. Very repetitive tasks that just require if this, then that logic. That's just old fashioned automation that we've been doing for a long time. That's a great thing, but that's not necessarily what the focus of this specific webinar is, right? This specific webinar is focused on AI application. When can you use AI, or in this case, large language models, LLMs, like your ChatGPTs and your Claudes of the world, to integrate into your automation workflows and drive real value for your organization? So that's what we're going to focus here. So if we know that the outcomes we're trying to get by automating with AI is reduce manual workload, improved accuracy, increased throughput, and just in general, better business outcomes, how do we start that? Well, from our perspective, you have to start by identifying key processes, right? You have to get a list of the processes that are important to your organization, and you have to evaluate those key processes for automation readiness, right? Some processes are going to be ripe for automation and some are not. Some are not going to be great candidates for immediate automation, right? So we think of it as kind of a four-phased approach, which is phase one is that evaluation phase, which is assess current core processes for their automation readiness after you've defined your list of processes. From there, you want to document the processes that you think are ripe for automation. Usually, this documentation is done through a process map because you want to understand the flow, the decision points, and all of the variables that you're going to need in order to effectively automate that process. Phase three is build. So use an automation tool. We're going to talk about some of the platforms that are available, but use an automation tool to actually build that workflow automation. And then phase four is test. You want to test it with your end users to make sure that it delivers the expected results inside of your process. So that is a really simplified way to think about the operational processes that you have in your business and to start listing them and then evaluating them for potential automation readiness, specifically AI automation readiness when it comes to our topic in this workflow. So how do you evaluate processes for AI readiness, right? So when we're talking about whether or not a process is a prime candidate for automation, and if it is a prime candidate for AI for automation, is it a candidate that is just traditional automation with if this then logic, or is it a process that is going to need AI tools to sit within that automation process to deliver the results that you expect, right? And so we have a little checklist or kind of a conceptual workflow that we work through when evaluating a process, and it starts by just understanding, is the process dominated by manual and repetitive tasks? The reason why this is important is because obviously repetitive, time consuming manual processes are the best for automation. There's a lot of manpower and time that goes into executing them. And so those are the perfect ones to look at for automation because you can get a lot of work time back by automating those processes. One of the considerations that you have to think about on this specific point in the checklist is how much decision making is required by a person, how much human intuition is needed to execute this manual process. It doesn't mean that if there's a lot of human intuition that it can't be automated, but what that might mean is this is one of those where we really do need that AI capability to be able to make some of that human intuition automated as opposed to needing an individual person to look at it, right? So the next thing that we want to look at is, does the process suffer from delays, human error, bottlenecks? What are the expected benefits we expect to get out of this, right? And the reason why this is so important is if you look at a process and you say, first, yes, this is extremely manual, it'd be great if we automated it. The next question is essentially, what is the actual value we'll get for it, right? Because if it turns out that the process is extremely manual, but it takes one person 30 minutes a month to do it, and that's it, it's really not that valuable. You get 30 minutes a month back. That's nice, right? But is it worth the time and the effort and everything that goes into fully automating it? Probably not, right? So you want to be able to clearly identify the benefit that you expect to get by automating this process. And you want to do that by setting clear KPIs, right? So if you say this process takes 100 hours of manual work every month, our goal is to get 80 of those hours back, then you need to measure it before you make the automation, and then you need to measure it after you make the automation, and you need to hold yourself accountable to reaching that objective of clawing 80 hours of time back. And then you need to reallocate that time to other areas, to more value add areas, right? To make sure that you get the intended benefits from the automation exercise. The next thing is, do you have the necessary data elements to trigger this workflow, right? The way that most automation workflows are going to work is they're going to use triggers and data points to go step by step and trigger the automation. Both automation tools and AI require clear and well-structured data to work effectively. So if you have bad quality data, if you don't have structured data, if you just don't have data available at all, then this probably isn't the best process to focus on for automation until you have built better data structures and better data quality to support it. But if you have good data structures and good data quality in place, then it could be an excellent candidate for automation. The next checkpoint is, are there points in the process where decisions rely on pattern recognition or unstructured information? And this goes to the point that I was hitting on earlier, which is this traditional automation or is this true AI automation, right? Is this, if this data element is this, it branches and it does this. And if it's this, it branches and it does that. That's a traditional automation workflow. Or do you need someone or something to read a PDF, extract data elements from a PDF that, by the way, does not follow the same format every time, meaning that it can't just be traditional OCR. And then you need to extract those data elements, write a summary of the information that's in the PDF, and then feed it somewhere like into a database or something like that, right? Like is there specific decisions, pattern recognition, the digestion of unstructured information, scanning different things like that? Like, is there something that traditionally would require a human, but now with LLM technology, you can automate using these AI tools? Does that exist, or is this just traditional automation? And by the way, if it's traditional automation, you should still do it if there's value there, right? Like, it's just, that's not what this webinar is about. Although you can extract a lot from this webinar about just traditional automation, but we're specifically talking in this one about workflows where that AI piece is necessary, but it all fits under the automation bucket, which is obviously a good thing to do if you have quantified the value and you expect it to be worth the value and the effort, right? So if AI automation is necessary, then you know going into an automation build, we're going to have to pull in an LLM to do a piece of this work where we need to recognize patterns or digest unstructured information or do whatever is required in that scenario. Apologize for my little time tracker that keeps popping up. It's very annoying. The next question that you have to ask is, can the process be broken down into clear steps with logical branching pathways? If you want to build automation, you have to be able to clearly define the steps and break it down into logical branches. So you have to be able to make a process map that clearly shows the workflow and what the logical points that branch the workflow are, right? You have to be able to track and follow what the actual pathway is. Some of this you might have to discover during the process mapping exercise, but either way, this is something that you're going to have to be able to do um, if you want to automate it. Okay, the next thing is, do you have the resources to build and maintain the automation workflow? So if you're evaluating getting into automation or AI automation, you need to know who on your team is going to build and then who's going to maintain, who's going to test, who's going to check it. You can outsource that, or it can be an internal resource, but you have to have a plan for who's going to manage and maintain. And then the final couple of checks are, do leadership support the effort? You really want to make sure that you have buy-in from leadership in order to automate. And then that final piece, and this is very similar to the point we talked about before, but just, are there human judgment elements that cannot be delegated to AI? So if there are steps that you just purely can't delegate to AI, then you need to have a step in the process, if you're still going to pursue automation, that escalates it to a human for review. So you still might be able to get 80% of it automated, but maybe there is a step that you have to send over to a person to have them review, or maybe that pushes it down the list of priorities for automation because there is a step in this process that you just can't delegate to AI. It must have human judgment review that step of the process, right? So this checklist and those considerations is, once you have your list of processes, you look at your processes and go through this, and whatever processes meet the criteria of good processes for automation, then you want to stack rank them in order of benefit. What's the expected benefit of doing this? And that'll give you your work list, right? Start at the top one with the most expected benefit and work your way down. That's a very simplistic kind of breakdown of it, but that's the best way to approach figuring out which processes you want to focus on for automation. So quickly, before I move on to the next step after you've found a process to automate, does anybody have any questions? Please put them in the chat if you do, on evaluating processes for readiness for automation or AI automation, or questions on the difference between just your old school traditional automation versus AI integrated automation. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so we'll jump on. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to put those in the chat, right? So this is very simple. I made up a fictional process in order to illustrate this concept for the webinar, right? But hopefully this will help you guys understand. So the next step, once you've identified a process that you want to automate, is, and you've vetted it for whether or not it's a good candidate for automation, and it is, you want to document it. And we prefer to document it through a process map, right? You can use, this is done in Visio, you can use Miro, Lucid, doesn't really matter. The key is, you want to clearly document the process. So in this sample process, this is a fictional customer feedback triage process, which I'll show you a little bit more about in a second. But the idea is, if you were a SaaS application company and you had a survey that you sent out to customers who used your app, and they filled that out and they provided free text commentary about your application right now, the current state. So if you're automating this process, you would process map the current state process. The current state is, the customer submits their comments via the feedback form that routes to the marketing assistant. The marketing assistant reads the full feedback text. They then digest and write a concise summary of customer feedback. They then classify that as positive, neutral, or negative. They also classify the feedback as whether, is it about a product? Is it about the product? Is it about a specific feature? Is it about a specific service or the quality of service? Or is it other? Does it fit into another category? They then log that feedback in a SharePoint list so that they have a historical repository of it. And then they send an email to the product director with that feedback. The product director receives it and reads it so they can incorporate the feedback into their product development, right? So that's a pretty manual process, right? Every time a survey gets submitted, the marketing assistant is going to have to read, digest, write a summary, and then decide classifications for the tone and the classification of the feedback. Like, what is it about? Right. And so I made this process up because I think it illustrates the concept. It's simple, but it gives us a good illustration of how you go down this process. By process mapping it, I now understand the workflow, right? So if I'm going to build automation on this process, I now understand that I need to have my initial trigger be when the customer submits feedback via a form. And then when they submit that feedback, I need the marketing assistant would traditionally read the full feedbacks text. So this is how I know that this is an AI automation process and not just regular RPA, is because there is some level of intelligence that is needed to read the text, write a concise summary of the text, and then make decisions about the classification for the tone and the product classification for the feedback, right? So that's where the AI piece comes in. I need an LLM to be able to do these steps and actually read and write an intelligent summary and classification of the response that we've got from a customer, and then log it and send it over to the right person, right? So I've added these little notations to just highlight where I have steps that an LLM is going to have to be involved, where they're going to have to understand what's going on and use the actual AI piece to make an intelligent decision about this process, right? So that is that. And then from there, once I understand how the process works, now I can actually build the automation workflow. So for today's sample, I built it in Power Automate. If you're a Microsoft shop and you have the licensing, Power Automate is a great tool to build automation workflows like this. If you don't want to use Power Automate or you're not a Microsoft shop, Zapier is another great one that's out there, and it has some LLM plugins. I actually have no idea how to, it's N8N. I have no idea how you're actually supposed to pronounce that. I need like the phonetic pronunciation from them or something to understand if it's just Naden or like, well, I don't know what it's supposed to be. But anyway, if you look up N8N, you will be able to find it. That's a great automation tool as well. There's a lot of other tools that are out there that are readily available. Those are the three that I use most common. Doesn't mean they're the best ones, just the ones that I kind of prefer. But for today's example, I'm going to be showing you, this is a screenshot of it, but I'm actually walk you through how I set it up. And that is a Power Automate flow to take this process, hit the OpenAI API, and use ChatGPT as an LLM to conduct these steps right here and write a summary, do the classifications, log in SharePoint, and then send an email, right? So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for just a second so that I can get that workflow pulled up. And then I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna walk you through how I actually set it up. So let me share my screen. Can everybody see this again? You got me? Uh, looks like Alfredo. Oh, yep, perfect. Thank you, Alfredo. Okay, so I made just like a fake survey. Very simple, right? It's two questions. It's one is star rating and a free text, but it's just this is the this is the sample of what the customer feedback survey would be, right? So I made this in Microsoft Forms. This could be SurveyMonkey. This could be like whatever you use if you were an actual SaaS company that collected this feedback, whatever that was. This could be your starting point. But just for the sake of demonstrating this, I started in Microsoft Forms because that was a little bit easier, right? So in Power Automate, I started by setting up a trigger. So most workflows are going to be triggered from a trigger event. In this instance, returning a response is the trigger event, right? And so this is very simple. I started my workflow with a Microsoft Forms when a new response is submitted trigger. And then the next action that I'm going to add is to get the response details, right? So I'm going to get the response details. I'm going to return that. And then I'm going to pull in all of the answers and the metadata from a survey response. And then from there, and this is where you bring in the integration to OpenAI, I'm going to use the HTTP call action with a post method to the OpenAI API. I'm going to put in, this is where you're going to put in your OpenAI API key. This is one of ours, which I'm going to turn out and swap out after we have this video, so you guys don't rack up a bunch of OpenAI credits on our API key. But this is where you go with an OpenAI key. You would set up a post HTTP action with your stuff, and then you will enter in the body the prompt that you want to give it, right? So you're going to write your specifications. So you can see right here, what I'm doing with ChatGPT is I'm saying, you are a helpful assistant that summarizes customer feedback and classifies its tone as positive, neutral, negative, and classifies the topic as product, feature, service, or other. I define its role. I give it the feedback. So this is the response details element that we returned from the form. And I tell it to provide a concise, direct, one-sentence summary, tone, and topic in JSON format with keys of summary, tone, and topic. So you set up your prompt using your OpenAI API key inside of the HTTP action that will return a response where it takes a response details, it hits it against the OpenAI API, and it returns details back in the format that you set it up. You can then use a parse JSON action to set up and actually extract the data elements that ChatGPT returned from the HTTP action. Now, some of you might be watching this at this step and be thinking like, okay, this sounds cool, but I have no idea what you're talking about on these last two steps, right? Like the when a new response is submitted and get response details, those are all fairly straightforward. I know Jason is in here, and Jason I know is a IT guy, but some of you who are not and you're more on the biz ops side, you might be thinking like, I don't really know how to do that. That's okay. If you don't know how to do it, A, you can call me and I can help you do it, but also B, you can literally tell one of these LLM tools like a ChatGPT what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, and it can write this code and give you directions on how to set it up so that you can actually do it. You don't, that barrier of knowledge has been lowered so much with these tools. You don't have to know exactly what to do on this front. You can just ask it and prompt it and take screenshots and go back and forth with it a little bit, and it can help you work into actually setting this up effectively. In this instance, what this is going to do is it's going to parse out the JSON, so it returns it, and then I'm going to have it take the information that it parsed from the JSON setup and load it into a SharePoint site, right? So I set up a SharePoint site. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take one of the responses, I wanted to put the sentiment, I wanted to put the classification, the date submitted, and an AI summary of what it said inside of the SharePoint. And then from there, and I did set this one up just to show you what branching logic looks like if you have branching logic inside of an automation. But from there, I set a condition that says if the classification is product, then I want to send it, both of these sent to myself. But the theory behind this is, let's say that you wanted to send any product related feedback to your director of product, but if you had performance related feedback, you wanted to send it to your IT director or your app dev director, right? Or whoever that is, then you could build conditions out here that says, okay, if this feedback is about the product, then we want to route this to our product director. If this feedback is about performance, we want to route it to the IT director. And you can make this branching logic depending on what is returned, right? And so that whole sentiment, that classification, that AI summary, those are all done via ChatGPT, ingesting what is put into the survey, building those classifications, loading it into SharePoint, and then triggering the flow to send an email. I have both of these sent up just to email me specifically. But obviously, if you were building this on a non-fictional process, you could take this ability to build branching logic and apply it into many different scenarios, including branching logic higher up the workflow, right? That level of branching workflow, like there are much more complicated automation flows than this that you can and will build if you get into this. I wanted to build a relatively simple one to illustrate how you do it and what the concept is. But this branching logic I thought was important to illustrate just so you understand how you can branch things at different places based on logical feedback. So if we want to test this and see how it works, then I'm just going to fill out the survey, right? And so I'm going to write some piece of feedback right here, and I'm going to say, um, this product worked pretty well. I was hesitant at first. I did not know if it would be valuable, but after using it several times, it's been extremely beneficial for me. Obviously, very generic. This is a made up application, so we don't even know what it does, but I now submit that and the workflow will run. We'll give it a second to run. And when it runs, as the receiver of the feedback, I end up with this email. We have received new application feedback on 8/21, which is just now. It was positive. It was about the product. Product worked well and was extremely beneficial after initial hesitation, right? So that was a pretty simple example, but I wrote about 3 or 4 sentences, and it summarized essentially what I said, which was I was initially hesitant, but it actually worked pretty well, classified it as product, read it correctly as a positive sentiment, and it sent me this email to give me that quick update on how that worked, right? And if we go back and we check our SharePoint, refresh that, we can see that it also logged that result inside of SharePoint, right? So that all happened in about 2 seconds. In fact, if we go back and look without opening it up, we can see the run history and it ran in 4 seconds, right? So it took about 4 seconds. So however long that process that we previously had, which I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint deck real quick, but however long this process that we originally had was, which was a marketing assistant manually reads each feedback, writes a summary, log, classifies it, logs it into SharePoint, and then sends it to an email. Even if this only takes like 3 minutes, it it now happens automatically in 4 seconds. And if you were doing this, let's say you have a high use application and you got a few thousand of these every month, then you've just got a significant lift in time back to your marketing assistant. You're getting real-time feedback to your product director much more quickly. You've now automated this entire process that previously was manual and required automation away, and you can run it through ChatGPT to make those decisions or those interpretations or the summary that originally had to be done by an individual. You can run it through and have the model do all of that, right? And that allows you to automate that piece away. So that is the way that you can work through that. So I'm going to stop for a second actually there because that's kind of the bulk of the content we had today. I didn't know how long this was going to take, but was that interesting, helpful? Do you guys, I know the chat is the only thing open, but do you guys have questions on that specific setup? I'm not seeing any questions, which is okay. Um, okay, perfect. So if you are interested in doing this yourself, you think there's an application inside of your business. If you're interested in connecting with us, feel free to reach out to me. We're also going to put a lot more videos out on our YouTube channel. My email is cade.brewster@brewsterconsulting.io. You can hit me up at any time to talk through any of these processes, especially ones that are more complicated that exist inside of your business operations that you'd like to talk through. You can also see on our YouTube channel a lot of the information that we have there. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is get a list of processes, use a checklist like this to evaluate those processes and their readiness for automation, and also to delineate between traditional automation and AI driven automation. Do they have that intuitive like decision making that is going to require an LLM to be involved, or is it just if then logic that you need to apply? Process map it so you understand exactly how it works. Take that process map, use a tool like Power Automate, Zapier, or N8N, or however you're supposed to pronounce this, and go and build an automation workflow. It gets easier and easier the more that you build as well. So I'd encourage you to start testing a few pull those in, get all of that set up. This can be a really valuable tool for your business, but you have to make sure that you focus on actual positive ROI use cases that have real value in being able to do that. Um, thank you, Greg. That's a very nice comment. I appreciate that. Hopefully it was helpful. I'm glad you got audio back, Greg, if you finally got the audio to be figured out. But yeah, so I apologize again for the delay of a week in the delivery of the webinar. Like I said, I was on my deathbed last week. Luckily, I made it off, at least temporarily. But hopefully this was interesting. We didn't have as many folks today, just with the delay, but hopefully this, for those of you that did show up, this was interesting and valuable. I'll stay on for a couple minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we're done a little bit early, and so I think we should be in a good spot. But I appreciate you guys joining us. And like I said, I'll stay in for another couple minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, I think we're in a good spot. Hopefully, this was helpful in illustrating the way that you can start to approach this uh, this integrating automation and AI specific automation inside of the processes at each of your respective businesses. So thank you very much.